Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So your girl ran out of resin and I'm waiting for it to, yeah, I'm looking at my tattoo and not a watch. I'm waiting for it to get here, and so that means we're gonna do a sit down video. It's still gonna be super fun even though we're not mixing up resin or putting any flowers or any weird things in resin today, but don't you freaking worry because we will be soon, and I'm pretty excited. You know what? My outfit, I just realized I kind of feel like I look like a fortune teller or something. Like I'll tell you all of your resin futures. It's all gonna come out fantastic as long as you mix it properly. It will not explode. Anyway, so I put up a poll on my Instagram because that is what I do when I don't know what to do. So I wanted to see what you guys wanted, and let me just take a second to say, if you're not following me on Instagram, you totally should be, because I do this kind of thing all the time where I ask you guys what you want to see, what kind of projects you want to see. You guys sometimes, like in last week's video, you choose what flower we put into resin. So definitely follow me on Instagram if you ever want to like take part in these polls or vote or anything like that, what type of video, because that is what this situation was. So I put up in one of my polls whether you guys wanted to see a resin Q&A or if you wanted to see my resin fails part 2, because I have a part 1, so you should go watch that one. It's a doozy. So I'm sure you guys saw the title of this video already, so you already know that we're going to be doing a resin Q&A, and so that means I put up another poll in my Instagram and asked you guys what you wanted to know, what kind of questions did you guys have, and y'all delivered. Oh well, I guess you kind of can't see because my camera's not focusing on it, but just know that I'm scrolling through many questions. So we're gonna start with the one that came in first. So the first question I have is, how do you keep your inks from getting all muddy on the back to where it ends up getting gummy? So some of my pieces have ended up doing that, and I've kind of like, in the past, I have gone in with like an X-Acto knife and kind of like trimmed the edges to the best of my ability and then tried to do like a top coat over it as much as I can. But my rule of thumb for as much, like how much ink I add to a piece is 3 layers. And that's because I like a more, like I do like the dripping effect. And I do get some of that with the way that I do it, but I do also like the smoky effect where the ink is a little bit thinner and kind of like is wispy and pretty. I'll do a layer of the colors, like drip drop of the colors, and then I'll do a layer of white. So I'll drip white right over that, and then I do that a couple of more times, and then that usually gives me the results that I'm looking for. I suggest doing like a couple of test pieces where you do different amounts of layers, like do 3 layers, then 4 layers, or even 2 layers, 5 layers, and see like which effect you really like the most, because that's basically what I did. So the next question I have is, how do you know what colors not to mix? And I sometimes mix colors that are pretty nasty, and it's just, again, it's all about like kind of just going for it and testing things out yourself and seeing which colors you do like. Sometimes, you know, I get color combos that I for sure was not planning on but came out really cool anyway, so it's all about like testing it and seeing what you like, what your preferences are. As like a basic, again, just a basic rule of thumb for me, I don't mix orange and blue because that to me makes brown. I guess I try to mix like colors together, you know what I mean? I do a lot of rainbows, but I do it in like the Roy G. Biv way where the color next to it mixes really nicely with the other colors. The next question I have is, what is the hardest step when using resin? What is the hardest step when using resin? I don't know if I would say any step is like hard to do. It's just about knowing as much as you can when you're trying to make a certain kind of piece, like knowing that flowers need a couple of layers to kind of sandwich it in. You know, it's all about like knowledge, watching videos and watching people on Instagram. There are a lot of incredible artists on Instagram. There are a lot of other amazing artists on Instagram that work with resin and that are very like knowledgeable and willing to share their knowledge. So I wouldn't say that there's anything that's like super hard. It's just when you don't know something, it can seem like it's hard. So like say, you know, you didn't know that a flower needs a couple of layers so that it doesn't float out, and then the flower does float out. Like, that's annoying, and it's hard to like go through those pieces where you don't know certain things and then learning. But I'm trying to think of like each step that I do, and it isn't very hard, and maybe an annoying answer would be the waiting. Waiting is pretty hard. So the next question I have is, should you use Topcoat after finishing every piece, or can you go without using it? You can absolutely go without using it. For me, depends on the mold. So if the mold is shiny on the inside, then your piece is going to come out in the same like way. So if it's matte, it's going to come out matte. But if your mold on the inside is shiny, then your piece is going to come out with a shiny finish. So if it does and you like it that way, that's totally fine. You absolutely do not have to do a top coat. You definitely don't have to add it for like any like functionality reasons. It's totally fine and finished. If you consider it finished, then it's finished, you know, because it's your art and you decide how it's gonna look in the end, you know what I mean? But if you are looking for like I said, that juicy top coat, like that sparkly, pretty, thick top coat, I would say yes. Like, if you're gonna ask me if I have to top coat every single one of my pieces, the answer is yes. Putting a top coat on your piece will make you be able to see inside your piece even more and more detail in the piece. This question I have is, what color brand do you use? And I use, so these are the three main alcohol ink brands that I use. The first one, and it is the Jacquard Pinata alcohol inks. The other one I use is this one, Tim Holtz Ranger alcohol inks. And the last one I've been using a lot since we tested it out in a video are these ones, and it is the Bria Reese alcohol inks. These are amazing. I love them. So those are the three alcohol ink brands that I use a lot. So the next message I got isn't actually a question, but I just want to read it out anyway. And it says, you should do a video with your husband teaching him how to do resin art. Yes, I should. You tell him that. You guys tell him that. I've been trying to tell him. You guys tell him. The next question I have is, what can I do if the resin stuck to the mold? So I've had this happen to me a lot in the past. It doesn't happen to me anymore. So why don't I first tell you how you can avoid this happening? And I always shout this guy out. Philip Danner, or Philip.Danner on Instagram, gave me this tip, and I used to use one of these. This is a blowtorch, and I used to use these to like pop bubbles. And what those will do, since it's like legit fire, is it'll like kind of melt your mold, and it'll melt the resin, and it'll fuse them together, and that's how your resin will kind of stick to a mold, where when you try to like pop it out, it like either rips the mold, or you have to like, you know, kind of cut into your piece a little bit. So what I've switched to is one of these, and this is a heat gun. It's Chandler Tools. And I got this off of Amazon. This is in, actually, if you want to check out the Amazon link down in my description, I have all of the things listed in there that I use, that I get off of Amazon, and this is on there. So this thing is amazing. It's not fire, it's just heat, and it pops the bubbles just as well. But what it doesn't do is melt your mold, and it doesn't fuse your pieces to your mold. So thank you, Philip. Thank you. My neighbors are like, who's Philip? And since I've used that, I pinky promise you, I have not had a resin piece stick to a mold. I have not had to tear mold. You guys know that I have had to do that before. I used to do it a lot because this thing used to burn a lot of my molds, but I don't have to anymore because of that. So that is how I avoid that. But let me get back to the actual question that you asked me, which is what you can do. And what I've done in the past is either I've noticed what's happening and I'll cut into the piece so it doesn't tear my mold. But if you tear your mold, obviously, like, If you tore a hole in it, I've actually used electrical tape, and I'll tape it on the inside, and the electrical tape will come out with the piece, but you can easily peel it off. So I have done that to like block holes, and I know you guys have seen that in some of my videos where I use that purple mold. I'll kind of like block a couple of the little holes with some electrical tape, and it's good to go. If some of the mold is like stuck onto your piece, I've taken an X-Acto knife and kind of cut it off. You can try to do like a top coat right over it, or you can even sand it down where you've had to like cut into your piece. The next question I have is, how long do dried flowers last before you have to use them? And I usually use up my flowers. I actually have like an entire photo album. The photo album that I used, and I get this question a lot actually, so this is a good time to answer it, but the photo album I use to store my flowers is either called a magnetic photo album or it's called a self-adhesive photo album. And I'll like stick my flowers in there, and they're safe, and they're, you know, they're away from the sun, so they won't kind of like lose any of their color. So I'll usually use my flowers like a week or two after I've taken them out of books or silica gel. The next question I have is, how did you get into resin? And I feel like that's a loaded question, and I've been thinking about doing a video basically about like my art journey, because fam, it has been a journey for me to get here, and let me know if you guys would be interested in seeing that and hearing my story. So I used to make jewelry, and I also used to work in an art store, Michael's craft store to be exact, and I saw resin as one of the things that we sold, and so I had no idea what it was, and at the time I was making jewelry, so I wanted to try to put stuff, like I was mainly doing gemstones, so I was trying to make pendants with gemstones in resin, and I did like little hearts and, you know, like little ovals and, you know, pendants, and that's basically how I got into it. In short, it was just to make pendants, and then, you know, it kind of got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and now we're here with a wall of resin. So that's basically how I got into it, and I've loved it ever since, and I've moved away from jewelry, obviously. The next question I have is, how do you hang your pieces with a hook? And I actually have a whole tutorial on how I drill into my pieces and how I hang them. I have two different ways that I hang some of my pieces. So if you want to go check out that video, I believe it's a couple videos back. I'll try to link it up at the top here. But I do drill into them, and I kind of like string them up, and some of the pieces I put like little wall hangs on the back. The next question I have is, do you use a pressure pot during the curing process? And I currently don't, but I really want to get one. I want to get one so badly. I want to try this out. So many of you guys are commenting down below that I need to get a pressure pot, and I hear you, I see you, and I'm for sure working on it. I'm gonna get one, and we're gonna try it out for a video, because I'm excited. I'm excited to try our pressure cooker. I almost said a crock pot. So the next question I have is it better to add ink to the resin when it starts to thicken? Does the timing affect the ink pattern? And it absolutely does. So if you add your ink when you've just poured it in and the resin is still pretty like thin and liquidous, then the ink will have an easier time like dripping down into your resin, and you might have more of a drippy effect. But if you wait a little bit, you'll still be able to like get some of the drippy effect, but actually the ink will be a little bit like slower, and it won't be so like spread out. You might also be able to get like a more of smoky effect if you let it wait a little bit. Hi! What's happening? Do you want to be in the video? Oh my god. Oh, so cute. Hey, what's you? Hey, what's you? Oh, you're so sweet. You're stinky but sweet. Goodbye. Next question is, hey, is there any way to prevent shrinking of small flowers? Love your videos. Thank you so much. Thanks. Is there any way to prevent shrinking of small flowers? I have not found a way, and honestly, I don't do small flowers that often anymore because of that, just because they shrink and kind of like shrivel up. I would think though that if you were to put them in silica gel, I'm sorry that my answer is always like put it in silica gel, but it might work. That way the flower, for some reason when you put small flowers into books, they do kind of like shrivel up a little bit. So if you were to put small flowers in silica gel, maybe they wouldn't do that. But I actually don't work with small flowers anymore just because of that. So I would definitely try silica gel. My next question is, did you find it difficult getting started with selling your pieces online? And yes, I did, but that is because I used to make jewelry, and making jewelry on Etsy, like making handmade jewelry and finding a place in that world is very hard. I always compared it to like being a needle in a haystack, and I honestly still think it's true. It is very hard to make jewelry and to find like a spot, a place where people are, you know, consistently purchasing from you, just because there's so many incredible artists, like so many. And I had a hard time with jewelry, but since I found like my, what's the word, is it niche, of preserving flowers and resin, I haven't had as much of a problem. But it is all about like marketing yourself, like posting every day, all the time, like being really present in there and being like on IGTV and trying to like kind of get into every corner of a social media and just be there and, you know, like catch people's eye. And if you love what you're doing, if you express how much you love it and people see that, people are also gonna love it too. So that is kind of how I found my way, is sharing my personality and myself with you guys, which was actually really scary to do at first. So the next question I have is, can you use any silicone mold, or does it have to be specifically for resin? And most of my molds are for baking. They're actually for cakes. The blue molds that I use a lot, these ones here, these are cake molds. So as long as they're silicone, and I usually look out for them to be shiny, but they don't have to be, because these aren't very shiny on the inside, so I do top coats with these. But anyway, as long as they're silicone, I would go for it. The next question I have is, how do I keep some glitter from sinking to the bottom? And my answer, and I've had this issue before where I was just so excited, like pouring resin like everywhere, or resin, did I say resin? Glitter, pouring glitter everywhere, because I'm crazy. I love glitter. So I've had pieces where all the glitter just sinks to the bottom, or the front really, and it makes it kind of like too much glitter. I know, it's hard to say too much glitter, like does that even exist? But it does. So what I will do is I will pour a layer of resin and I'll let that cure a little bit, and then what I'll do, instead of mixing glitter into the resin, like into the wet resin and then pouring it in, I'll do a layer of resin and then I'll take a little bit of glitter and sprinkle it on top of there, and that way it's not so like saturated with glitter. And then I'll do another layer of resin on top of that and kind of like seal the whole thing in. That way it's just a nice sprinkling of glitter, and it's not like overwhelmed with glitter, and it's not like just all piled like clunky in the front. I have a couple of pieces that actually did that, like got way too much glitter in the front, so that's what I do. I sprinkle a little bit in there. Next question is, how did you start off getting supplies you needed? And honestly, Amazon. I know I spout this all the time, but Amazon is like my best friend. I get all my molds there, not all, but I get a lot of molds there. I get a lot of the tools there. I get a lot of stuff from there, and it was nice to be able to get it really quick too, because I have Prime. But even if you don't have Prime, Amazon is still really cool to like find a lot of things that you might need for resin. You can even find some resin brands on Amazon, and I used to do that as well. You can find some of like the mold making, like Mold Stars on Amazon. But I had to do it really slow because it is expensive. It's so freaking expensive to get started into resin. And so I had to do it really slow, but like I said, at the time I was making jewelry, so it was kind of easy for me to go slow with it and get small amounts, because I wasn't making so, you know, huge pieces like I am now. I was making really small pieces, so I didn't need to buy resin that often. And also I was buying like cheap resin because I was still like learning, and I wanted to kind of get like a feel for resin before I started buying like gallons of it, and also before I started buying like more expensive brands of resin. So I started with like the really cheapy resins that you can find at Michael's. The next question I have is, what's a good starter kit? If you're a beginner and you've never like used resin before, I would probably start with a resin that you can buy at Michael's, like I said before. Start with a resin that you can kind of get used to, and it's not so expensive that it's gonna like break the bank. So I would try Art and Glow resin, or, you know, like I said, any of the resins that you can find at Michael's are pretty cheap, and you can also use coupons on them. I honestly would suggest checking out the Amazon link that I have down below. There's an alcohol ink kit that has like the full rainbow. I believe it's one of the pinata ones, the Jacquard pinata alcohol ink sets. And it's like the full rainbow, and you even get like a little white alcohol ink in it as well. So that's a really cool like beginner's kit for alcohol ink. And then if you get like a small thing of popsicle sticks, a small thing of plastic cups. Oh, I almost forgot. And a heat gun, not a torch. If you really have to, I used to use a lighter. Again, that will melt your mold if you know, hold it on to it too long. So I do suggest a heat gun. I don't think mine was too expensive. I believe it was around like $15 or $20, something like that. But you can use a lighter if you want to do that. The next question I have is, what do you use to top coat your pieces? And I use the CounterCultureDIY artist resin, and that stuff is usually for top coats or finishing off a painting. It's basically to give a thick, glossy, gorgeous top coat. It's amazing. It is very thick and it is very glossy. It's amazing. It's really good stuff. I use it on every single one of my pieces, and it's amazing. I do have a link down in the description for for all of the CounterCultureDIY products that well, it actually links to the casting resin, which is my resin of choice, my resin of life. And you can also use the code ARTSY at checkout with CounterCultureDIY, and it'll save you some money, which is really cool because I know that resin is expensive, so you can use that if you want to. But no pressure, you totally don't have to. I'm just throwing it out there in case you want to. The next question I have is, how do you clean up resin off of really anything, tables, molds, if resin doesn't fully cure? So I will take a paper towel and really quickly try to like wipe it up. And if I'm ever top coating, I also put, what I've actually started recently doing is using a trash bag. If you use it, like put a trash bag, someone suggested this to me, I think in the comments of one of my videos, so if that's you, thank you so much. It's amazing, you're a genius. But I lay down like a trash bag, and resin actually peels off of it. So I've been using the same trash bag for all of my top coats ever since, and I don't have to buy like tin foil or plastic wrap or anything like that, so that's amazing. Okay, and the next question is, how do you clean molds? And I sometimes use tape. I'll kind of like use duct tape to stick on the inside and pull it up, and that will get like hairs and anything like that out of it. Oh, you know what someone suggested to me recently was, let me look, hold on, let me look. So on Instagram, I'm following Jessica Young Art, and she actually commented on one of my pictures recently and suggested using tack cloth for cleaning molds before, you know, you start to like get any of, like I said, any of like the hairs or anything like that that might be in there. So like I said, I haven't tried that before, but I definitely want to. She said that it's better than tape and you can reuse it all the time, so I just wanted to put that out there, and I haven't used it, but I definitely want to. So it's called tack cloth. So thank you for that suggestion. I'm really excited to try it out. I feel bad because I've gotten a lot of questions, and I want to answer all of them, but I feel like I don't want to make you guys sit here for too long, so maybe we'll do a part 2 soon, and I'll screenshot some of these and answer them in the next one. But thank you guys so much for watching this video. Thank you so much to every single one of you that asked me a question, every single one of you that took the time to say that you love my work, and that, you know, you guys are just so flippin' nice, and I don't deserve you, and I love you to absolute death. And if I didn't get to your question, I'm so sorry, but I really, really appreciate you asking. I do think I'll do like a part 2 of this, just because you guys have so many awesome questions, and I feel bad leaving any of them unanswered. So look out for a part 2 soon, and I'll try to answer the rest of them. But thank you guys so much for watching this video. I love you to absolute death, and I'll see you on the next video. Goodbye.